started then. Welcome to another episode of Gadgetcast, where we bring you the latest in tech news and politics from Main Street. Remember that tagline from our scripts?
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. I can't complain.
Good.
What about
A lot
you?
more to talk about this week.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I know we had talked a little bit about what we wanted to go over today. Obviously, the elephant in the room that what we didn't talk about last week is coronavirus.
Yep. Not at all. We didn't even brush upon it.
We actually had, this is the coronavirus is the genesis of this show because we had, we've been doing audio for the longest time, and then we had gotten a new studio, and this hit, and we lost the studio and had to come up with something, so this is it.
Yep. Here we are.
Yeah. So, how have you been through the whole, sheltering at home?
I think my entire family is, they're stir crazy right now.
Oh, yeah.
My daughter, she's about to be 21, so she in particular has expressed her desire to go places, even though she doesn't have anywhere in particular that she's going to be going. I do believe that she wanted to go to her birthday, go out to Vegas for her birthday, but obviously that has been canceled. I think they are planning a trip later on out there this year, but who knows exactly when that will take place.
Right. Yeah, I know a lot of, I knew some weddings that got canceled. Had attended one Zoom funeral.
Yeah.
It was kind of sad. But yeah, no, honestly, I've been fortunate, able to still work and.
Yeah. Me and my wife as well. Both of us have been employed throughout this crisis. A lot of folks can't, say that, and all you can do is pray for those families that are experiencing difficulties during this time.
Yeah. So, I know one of the things that is common, thread on our show is obviously the internet and how it's used and the impact on society.
Right.
I think what's interesting personally about all of this is that imagine if this had hit 25 years ago before the internet.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Would have how long would we have lasted then with no Netflix and would we have even been able to go the 2 months we did?
Well, I think people would have been able to. It's just would it have been and trust me, I know that this is not appropriate term, but would it has been as enjoyable to shelter in place when as you said, you can't watch Netflix. You have all these movies or television shows on demand.
Well, it's to me, my thought is it's more about people being bored. That there was less people going out causing trouble because there was people were simply occupied. They had something to do instead of going out causing trouble. For the most part.
Yeah, I don't know. I there may be some validity that people, because they have been quarantined or locked in shelter for so long, that contributed to the looting and rioting. I just think that people will take advantage when they can. There's just that segment of people, and I don't have any percentages of how many of them there were, but an example of I'd like to use a lot of times is when you're stuck in traffic and you see one person drive on the shoulder to bypass the traffic and maybe get off at the next exit, and then you'll see a few more cars follow that person. Now everyone knows that it's wrong, but and I think the rioting in a lot of instances, the looting is another example of people being followers when they see, oh, well, he's getting items, he's getting this, he's getting that. I can't too. And it's not, I'm not going to get caught, or it's not that big of a deal. Well, it is a big deal. You're breaking the law. Um, you know, I think that's, what happens, that, once that floodgate is open, a lot more people who just same boat, they just want to follow that person or think they can get away with it as well, will follow.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, there's herd mentality,
Hmm.
to a lot of this. That's a lot of people who there's the monovision, the blinders that people get, right? That
Right.
if they don't experience it personally, they start to question whether it's happening.
Hmm.
They allow themselves to get gaslighted by people
Hmm.
with agenda, who say, "Oh well, I don't personally know anybody who died from COVID, so therefore the whole thing was a hoax."
Hmm.
And then they get together with other people who say, "Well, you know what? I don't know anyone either," and
Hmm.
then they think that they're validating each other's opinions
Right.
instead of going and looking for actual validation of whether it's true that nobody died from it or it's a hoax. Go to the
Hmm.
hospital. You know,
Right.
they never want to go to the emergency room, to the hospital to see if it's a hoax or not. But
Well, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there right now that are circulating. And what's funny to me is 25 years ago, people who promoted these kind of conspiracies that are out there now would have been looked at as kooks or whack. You'll believe in anything. And
dude,
now people promote these conspiracies that are really, really out there. And they'll send you links and, oh, look at this. See, this is what I'm talking about.
yeah, it's like like the thread again. It's the misinformation superhighway. It
Right.
does. It gives everyone a platform, but it gives this false sense that everybody's, every link is just as valid as every other link,
Right.
and that, hey, I provided you a link to prove my thing. It's like, yeah, but it was to a conspiracy website. I sent you something from MIT. You
Right.
know, those two things are not equal,
Nope.
but in some people's mind, it is. I actually had a discussion last weekend with somebody who told me basically that in their mind, everyone's truth is equally valid.
Mm.
And that's not true. That's that's like demonstrably not true. But okay,
Right.
but that's the type of thought people have now. That's why we have flat earthers again. You know,
Hmm.
who think that uh, you know because of their limited experience and whatever bias reinforcement they got on the internet, that therefore the Earth must be flat.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but it is one of those things that we've seen during the pandemic where people uh, they I found it interesting how many people clustered to that, you know, to the idea that there was in Michigan here there was a guy who started a website, Michiganders Against Quarantine, and he got like 250,000 people to join his group almost right away, like
Hmm.
within a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
um, which to me, was how many people were out there looking for that kind of validation of that kind of conspiracy. That the whole thing's a hoax, and you know, and it's one of those things sitting in your home too. That it's almost how much did that contribute to it? That people were sitting at home
Hmm.
uh, with nothing else to do except read
Right.
these conspiracies.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I am in that boat where I haven't had anyone personally in my family get COVID, but I do know of someone that church brother that had it, and he's been battling with it for 2 months. He's had
Yep.
a fever, continued difficulty breathing, etc. So, right, I know of someone that's had it, but no one in my immediate or
Right.
family.
I know it's. I've been very blessed and fortunate that nobody in my immediate family has, uh, caught it, let alone died from it. I do know 2 people who passed from it, though, that I had
Mhm.
met personally. You know, not
Right.
that I was real close with, but people that I had known who did pass from it. So it's
Mhm.
you know, it's real and it's serious, and
Right.
it's one of those things too where talking to people sometimes. Um, I can't remember the name of the term, but there is a term for it where people will disregard any facts that you give them once if it's going to violate a core belief,
Mhm.
um, and that seems to be rampant right now. You know, there are certain people who want to believe that it's all over and that it was all a hoax or whatnot. So uh, it's interesting because there's 2 dynamics. People without wearing masks is I have seen both the people getting angry at people without masks,
Mhm.
not wearing them, and I've seen people without masks getting angry at people with masks.
Yes.
Or wearing.
Yes. Yes. And listen, if you don't believe, if you think that is nothing to worry about, that's fine. But don't don't get into someone's face who is wearing a mask saying, "Oh, you're falling for it. You shouldn't believe it." That's up to them. And as a matter of fact, people used to
Just
wear masks if they were immuno suppressed anyway. If you were dealing with cancer and chemo, you might wear a mask anyway.
even if there
So
wasn't a
you
pandemic.
right, and you have no way of knowing personally unless you know that person why they're wearing a mask. They might feel that they need to wear a mask. That's not up to you. That's up to them.
Yeah, yeah, true. It doesn't hurt you if they're wearing a mask, and
No,
honestly, they're doing it to protect other people.
right. I mean,
I mean, it
shame
really.
on them people that are doing that. If they are doing that, shame on them.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's I've witnessed the interesting exchanges. Just going out to the store,
Mhm.
trying to stay socially distanced myself. Um, uh, you know, I have loved ones who are vulnerable, so I've been trying to take extra precautions. So it's one of those things. There was the. Did you go to the march yesterday? There was
No,
the.
unfortunately, I was not able to. Had to work, so I wanted to, but there were just some things I had to do that I didn't risk being out there and getting called, and then trying to rush to my car and
Yeah.
make it back here to do those things at that specific time that I had to do them.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
I went there. It was so I've been to other marches and other things before in the past. I mean, I've this was the most different one I've ever been in. Because
Hmm.
I've been to one during a pandemic, and it is one of those things where there are people who even on both sides of the aisle. It doesn't seem to be, although the views are pushed by different partisan sides.
Hmm.
There are people on both sides of the aisle who are taking this more or less seriously.
Hmm.
So there were people there. Most of the people there were wearing masks, but it was
Hmm.
interesting to try to do a march and maintain social distance from people.
Right.
You know, um, so it was interesting. It was stretched out over miles, and there was one cluster of people that seemed to like move through it, kind of
Is
like a
this
wave.
the one in Sterling Heights?
This was the one on Hall Road.
Right.
Yep. And yeah, stretched from Shaner to Garfield, and it was it was interesting. I took a drone out there and tried to get some shots of the crowd, um, but it was a new drone, my first time taking it out, and by the time I got it set up, most of the crowd had gone by, so didn't get some good shots.
Yeah, my wife was out there, but I unfortunately I couldn't join her. But I'm,
Okay.
I'm glad that some of the people when they first heard about it, they immediately started saying, "Oh, it's going to be a riot. It's going to be this. It's going to be that." And so it was a nice peaceful
Yeah,
protest.
yeah. Actually, it had very much a party atmosphere to it. It really did. It was a protest, and some of the things they were chanting were You know, I mean, it was a protest, and it was very obviously in March. But at the same time, you could tell from all the people who were there that they were just like that they were excited to be out of the house.
Hmm.
They kind of had that vibe, you know.
Right. Well, yeah, and hopefully, it will be not a big spread of new cases, coronavirus cases after
Yeah.
this. I know there was what was it, about 2 weeks back, the kids in Missouri, I think it was,
Hmm.
where they showed all the pictures of kids out there
At the
not
pool.
social distancing, yeah,
Yeah.
social distancing,
Yeah.
and everything. There's probably been a lot of cases of that. The George Floyd Memorial on Friday, I
Hmm.
believe.
Yeah.
A lot of celebrities and other people in there without masks. There were a good number of people with masks, but just a number of people that didn't have a mask sitting right next to someone.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I hope that we don't see another spike, a surge. But from what I'm hearing, and I don't watch the news every day, but there have been some cases where they are seeing, a couple of hundred more cases,
Yeah.
etc. As it transmits to more people.
Yeah. It is. It's one of those things now where I'm hearing some of the rhetoric that I'm hearing from people is the idea that we all have to get used to the idea that everybody's going to get it at some point,
Hmm.
right? And so the whole idea of social distancing was to not overwhelm the hospitals, right? And they think, well, okay, well, that's over now. Well, okay, is it? The first surge is over, but if you look at history, the second surge of the Spanish flu was far worse than the first.
Right.
You know,
Right.
in pandemics, that's generally the case, is that the second surge is worse than the first. So
Right.
what data is there to believe that this would be any different?
Well, and think about it. I don't have a count up right now, but the number of cases that we've had, have we even had 20, a quarter of the people in this country that have been diagnosed with it? I don't
Mhm.
think we've had that many cases. We haven't had,
Right.
you know,
No,
80.
we've had like 1.5 million confirmed cases in the U.S., but it's not, uh, like you said, that's 350 million people. It's not even
Right.
10% of the people.
So, right. I don't think we've had an accurate count because the testing has been so limited so far. But
Well,
again,
and
I
that seems
I
to be
don't.
so that's the funny thing, right? That's the key to opening, right? Testing,
Right.
and we need like ramped up testing capacity.
Right.
So
Yep.
now I hear the president saying, well, the problem is the test. The more tests you give, the more cases you have. So that's the problem is we'll just stop doing tests and then we'll have less cases.
Right.
So, and it's one of those things I see with, at work and things where they're saying, okay, it's safe to come back to work. I say,
Uh,
okay, will there be testing available? They say, no, but if you have symptoms, you can go to the doctor or the hospital and get tested.
right.
Well, you
Yeah.
call the
So
doctor at the hospital and they say, well, you can't come to this office to get tested. You have
I
to go to
just
the
looked it
other
up,
office to get testing. Well,
and so far we've had this is confirmed cases, 1.9 million cases.
okay, yeah.
That's ridiculous. That we don't even know how many cases are out there. So yes, we can definitely see another spike or a surge of cases after these protests and everyone is such close proximity to
Yeah,
each other.
yeah. Well, the interesting thing too is, as this goes on in time, uh, the virus continues to mutate. Other coronaviruses can pass from the animal kingdom into humans. What's the next, uh, you know, iteration of this that there needs to be? And this whole thing, I think that we were very fortunate in that this wasn't as deadly as the Spanish flu, because even the
Hmm.
first Spanish flu killed more people than really this has. I think that has a lot to do with just general, technology, medical technology, and sanitation today
Right.
compared to 100 years
Right.
ago. Um, Not everybody even had running water 100 years ago.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it was different time, different sanitation level contributed to it. but at the same time, it's we know what needs to be done, um, and I think people aren't going to feel safe until they know that there's those precautions being taken. You know what I mean?
I hate to say it. I talked to someone via social media about the president, and he was lamenting the choices that we had. That it's between Trump, Biden, and Bernie Sanders. That those were the three prominent
Right.
men that could have got the nomination. And I
So
so
did they
I
not consider the women to be viable, or
well,
is it
I don't think he considered the women at all, just because of his what he was saying. But
okay?
after you back and forth between us, because he kept saying that everyone is so it's just so bad, the choices. Okay, right. You can categorize this as the lesser of two evils because you knew who it was going to be. We knew a while ago that it was going to be Senator Biden and President Trump going head to head in November. You can categorize that as the lesser of two evils. But we already know, we've experienced what President Trump has been. And right now, I don't see how you can, with other than being subjective in opinion, you have no evidence that Vice President Biden, Senator Biden, would be worse than President Trump.
Oh, yeah.
There's no evidence to back that up, that
Well,
claim.
it's just a simple character, right? So, um, this is the thing. People are cynical about politicians, right? They're cynical about them being corrupt and all that. But Trump, and I've been following politics my whole life. Honestly, my father was in politics. I remember watching the Carter-Reagan election, in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really seen a time like this before in my life.
There's
When
never been
there's
another time like this.
well,
That
so
not in our
Jimmy
lifetimes.
Jimmy Carter had to give up his peanut farm because they accused him of being corrupt if he had kept it, right? Like he was gonna funnel government business by having the White House order peanuts. I don't really understand but that was the thing, is that they said that him keeping that business was corrupt.
Right.
But today, he's openly kept his businesses. He openly funnels government business into his properties. He goes
Yes.
golfing. He spent over $150 million golfing at his own properties where he pockets all the profits.
Yes.
Everybody knows it. Nobody argues against it. The people who support him just say it's not a big deal.
Right. Right. But yeah,
So
we
the
this
standard,
president, we've had more chaotic, and we go from one big news story to another, week in and week out. And it's ridiculous. And a lot of it is mostly due to his own doing. I can see if someone says, "Oh, the impeachment thing wasn't him; it was the Democrats." Okay, but what about a lot of this other, stuff that, like you said, the graft and
why are his children
corruption?
working for the White House? His
Correct.
unqualified daughter and son-in-law are working in the White House. They have an off. He put his son-in-law, a real estate developer, in charge of important things like the coronavirus response and Middle East peace.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we
Well,
got a peace deal, right?
I mean, these people were not vetted by the Senate. They're not official in any way. They're just basically White House staffers who've been given extra power by virtue of being related to him.
Right. Right. Yeah. 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 It is. It's a shame, but I think that he will be out of office. He'll be a one-term president. I believe so. What I see.
Well, I certainly hope you're right, because I'll tell you what, if he's not, um,
Oh, if he's not, I think we have yet to see the the lame duck President Trump will be worse than the first term President Trump.
oh, absolutely.
It will be no holds barred after that.
Yeah, the way he is right now is how he'll be for the next 4 years. Like,
Oh, I think
in
it'll
terms
be a
of
lot
troops,
worse.
onto the citizen, trying to crack down on First Amendment expression. It's
Right. Right.
yeah, it would be a lot more of the same of what we have now. I mean, it's crazy right now that you have uh, people who worked with him directly, General Kelly
General
General
Mathis.
Kelly and General Mattis, who worked directly with him, and they both come out and say this man is not, he is a threat to the Constitution. He's not qualified.
And it's funny because someone was saying that it was very unusual for military leaders, former military leaders, to come out and speak, and it is. But to me, that should be an indication to people that something's wrong here. I there was a lot of things that I didn't agree with what General Kelly did when he was working for the White House, but he kept his mouth shut. He didn't really say anything that was against the president, and him siding with General Mattis, I think was that was strong for him to do.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
All right. So what do you want to move on to next?
Well, so you had mentioned, I know that so Google is going to be one of our big topics, right? I mean, Google is the elephant in the room for search and a lot of what's going on lately. Google Incognito mode, it's funny because this is a very techy thing. Not everybody is aware of Incognito mode or what it does, but there is a feature in Chrome that is called Incognito mode that turns off saving your browser history.
Right.
But that's pretty much it. So there's a lot of people who assumed that Incognito mode meant that there wasn't any tracking going on.
Right.
And I'll be honest, I don't know if it says that anywhere when you turn on Incognito mode. The only time I've ever really used it is for troubleshooting. I don't know about you.
Let me see. Let me turn it on right now. Let's see what it says. It says you've gone incognito. Now you can browse privately, and other people who use this device won't see your activity. However, downloads and bookmarks will be saved. So it says Chrome won't save the following information: your browsing history, cookies and site data, information entered in forms. It says your activity might still be visible to websites you visit, your employer or school, your internet service provider.
Yeah.
And then you can turn off blocking third-party cookies.
Okay.
So
yeah,
that's incognito mode.
So that sounds very much like the article that I found when you mentioned the topic said a lot of this stems from people not understanding what it was doing.
Well, I'll say this. So what we just it said Googled or Chrome wouldn't track some of that stuff. Now I didn't say that the websites wouldn't, but if the lawsuit is true and Google was tracking that information, shame on them.
Actually, what the lawsuit says is that Google was allowing other sites to track people.
Well, I'm sorry. It says it now. Trust me, I don't know. That could have been changed recently. I don't know if that's what it said previously. That documentary about the Great Hack.
Right.
And what people don't understand or seem to understand is that data is an important thing now, and your own personal data is huge because these companies can literally break you down to your purchases, where you visit, who you are associated with on social media, your response to certain activities, etc. You like this, you don't like that.
Right.
It's frightening, and that stuff was weaponized in the 2016 election. So
what?
Right, and what else could be weaponized?
Well, so that's an interesting segue, honestly, into one of the other topics we were talking about is the fact that one of the biggest tools of the resistance that's emerged is something that you and I have been using since it was in beta.
Mm-hmm.
Is Google Docs,
Right.
another one of Google's products. Um, it's not encrypted. It's free. It's ubiquitous. You can pretty much view stuff and edit things from anywhere, um, which is why we started doing show notes in it in 2011.
Right. Yep.
And but it's been used, and honestly, it's funny because it's like I noticed it over the pandemic. That it was being used a lot more by teachers. That was the thing that really I noticed was taken off.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I started looking into this, I saw that article about it. It's become, and we'll share the article in the show notes, the links to what we're talking about in the show notes. But it's become the tool of choice for activists.
Uh-huh.
And the part that I thought was interesting is that um, that a lot of people think that that their biggest concern of activists is anonymity. But in truth, a lot of people have very little concern about anonymity. They have more concern about access, which is why they've taken Google Docs. And it's very interesting and telling because they know that honestly, there's very little you can do to not be tracked anymore, and that the best you can do is to try to be an effective activist to change people's minds or to drive change. So they're more interested in the effectiveness than they are in protecting their identities, which leaves people vulnerable.
Well, it does. One of the things, and we've talked about this in the past, is that we don't value our privacy like past generations have.
Yeah.
People will put out their what they think are innocuous things, but right, it's intimate details when you take those the collective of those that information and put it together. You know, when you're on vacation, who you're on vacation with, when you're coming back.
Yeah.
Those type of things. Your wedding anniversary is out there. Where high school you graduated from, what year you graduated from, when your birthday is, how old you are.
Oh, well, I mean, all that stuff too. It's funny because, well, not funny. You know, we've known for years that third-party companies were using things like quizzes on Google or Facebook, rather, to
What character are you?
Right. Yeah, to data mine that kind of information on people.
Right.
And that subsequent data breaches that expose more and more information about you has a cumulative effect, right? That makes you, there's more and more information about you out there in the dark web available to people who do want to do harm.
Right.
At a certain point, it does become I mean, it's concerning. At the same time, you have to work around it. So,
yeah, you do. I think, like you said, the benefits that people get, because I looked at a lot of those links in that Google Doc, one of the Google Docs that you sent, the activism, and I applaud what they are doing with that, because one of the things that I thought about it, we are so pressed for time these days, whether it be as parents, you are taking your kids to activities, soccer practice, some kind of instrumental practice or something like that. You have your extracurricular activities. I'm a huge participant in many of my church's activities, and there might be multiple weekends out of a month that, hey, I haven't had a break. So I get it, and no one person can do all of that. Those one doc, the one about media accountability or reliability, the links. One person's not going to be able to reliably go out there and verify all those links in that one document. I mean, it was 34 pages of links and rating them, etc. So
Yeah.
I do believe that the collective can do a better job, just like a lot of these open source OSs.
Yeah.
Linux back in the
Yeah.
day was I've tried very different iterations of Linux, and it was very it
Well,
wasn't that good.
it's the same kind of idea as clustered processing, like SETI used a long time ago, or crowdsourcing. And it's really what you're doing is crowdsourcing a lot of it. Um, it's funny, when I was going back through Google Docs, when I was reading that, I opened up my own Google Docs account, and that's where I found like our old show notes from 2011, and I realized that my family had used Google Docs to write my father's obituary,
Hmm.
uh, and we did it, collaboratively, where we
Hmm.
all added pieces to the story in Google Docs, and then we took that Google Doc, and that became his obituary.
Right.
Um, but that power of it to be able to be edited by anyone from anywhere ubiquitously, um, that's really, I think, where the power in activism comes from. Um, Getting people help they need right away. Some of those links were pretty interesting in terms of, you know, for COVID-19, getting people help that they needed. People
Right.
when they were in lockdown who couldn't get out and get groceries. Even going forward, there's still going to be, as the economy reopens, there's going to be people who are vulnerable who need help. um, and that's the kind of resources that we need to have.
Oh, right. But and I've had many discussions about the role of government in all of this, but to me, that's what we we shouldn't have to rely on
Yeah,
private citizens providing resources like that. That's something that your local government at least should be sending you. Hey, if you need help with this, here's numbers that you can call for this. For when we moved into the house, we got a little magnet that we could put on the refrigerator with the police department number, the
yeah,
city offices numbers, and whatever.
okay,
That same kind of response, I, and I know it came from the federal government, but I don't want a letter telling me who was responsible for my stimulus check. Send me
well,
send
especially
me a
when,
letter.
yeah, I thought that was particularly insulting because you spent my tax money to send me a letter that I know
Right,
is true, because I know
right,
I'm not personally responsible for the stimulus check. I know how government works. I had sense
right,
to this. Thank you.
right. But that's something that, imagine if they would have sent out a letter with, if you need to get a test kit, call this number. If you need
Yeah,
to do this, call this number. That
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the kind of information that, and this went out to everybody who's on the tax rolls.
Hmm.
That's what they should have. That's the kind of information that they should have been sending out. That was provided by private citizens.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy to me.
It's interesting. Just to kind of bring all this back together, but one of those things that we talked about last week that I think kind of ties into this was the social contract, right?
Hmm.
Contract we have as citizens with the government, and we give the government powers in that contract, right? That's what they talked about in the Bill of Rights, was, or the Declaration of Independence, is that government has a duty to the people. When the government's not meeting its duty, it's the rights and the duty of the people to throw off that government and form something that does
Right.
work. And the whole point of government is that uh, it's supposed to be we the people, right? There are people in society who were never part of that social contract, and that's the pain that we're seeing today, right? That's really what it comes down to, is that a lot of white people see the government as being there to work for them. They're more than willing to call the police when there's a problem because they think, they have an innate assumption that the police are on their side
Hmm.
because of that social contract. That's an inherent assumption on their part because of what they have been, they've grown up and believed that their whole lives. Other
Right.
people, um, and I wouldn't speak for anybody, but it's been expressed to me that, and correct me if I'm wrong, of course, uh, black people mainly were not included in that. And even to this day, I mean,
Uh,
aren't seen as being there for them. You
well,
know.
okay, so right, we can go through a long litany of grievances
Oh yeah. Well,
from
but
the
I guess
black
the worst thing
community.
though is that the activism, the thing that we need to do, is to build the government that does include everybody, right? So,
Well, what, right? Listen, all you got to do is live up to the words that, like, all men are created equal.
mhm,
If you lived up to that, that would be half the battle right there.
right, yeah,
We haven't lived up to the ideas presented by,
yeah,
those forefathers, and that's where, again, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he served in the military like I did,
hmm,
and he expressed how it makes him upset, when people don't stand or when they kneel for the
mm,
national anthem, and he sees it as a sign of disrespect, etc. I said, hey, you're entitled to your opinion, but just acknowledge that someone who may, like, Drew Brees had his famous statement about how he felt someone kneeling during because his grandfather's fought, both grandfathers fought in World War II.
right,
Many blacks have had. My grandfather fought in World War II. He was a sailor, but we've had soldiers, black soldiers, come back, after World War I and World War II, who were lynched. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
in uniform,
They had
lynched.
and after World War I, there was an entire bus of them
Yes.
that got lynched,
It's,
returning from the war.
do 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 you think someone who is subject to something like that would even feel the same way about, that symbol or the country? And I'm not saying that they
Yeah,
hate the country, but it's just, your level of love may be here, mine may be, significantly lower. That doesn't mean that I don't love it, but
right,
it doesn't hold the same sentimentality for
yeah,
me as it does you. And all you got to do is just acknowledge that. You don't have to agree with it, but just the acknowledgement of
yeah,
that, will that's going to at least open up a dialogue on why you don't. Like you said, the social contract, right? It's a cornerstone of society. The social contract hasn't been extended. We've got, like, some very fine print at the bottom of our contract that excludes us
oh my,
from some things,
yeah,
and it's not everybody. I'm trust me. It's just a certain segment of society that has perpetuated those thoughts and those actions, but
yeah,
the complicity comes in when you see that, or of someone doing that, and you're right along for the ride, or don't say anything.
yeah,
You allow that to happen, and I think that's what people, hopefully with this movement, people are at the end of the rope, and they are no longer going to remain quiet.
yeah. You know, uh, you've known me for a long time, and I've never been known for being someone to keep my mouth shut about my opinions.
Uh-huh. Right.
I mean, hell, I was protesting against the Iraq invasion,
Uh-huh.
the invasion of Afghanistan when it happened. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not Afghanistan. Um, it was one of those things I remembered recently after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time after 9/11 when George Bush had actually won me over in a way, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
his reaction after 9/11 was one his was to be unifying.
Oh yeah, yeah, it
And
was very inspiring.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he didn't lose me until he decided to go invade Iraq. Honestly, that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of where I split from him
Mm-hmm.
after that. But I remember I went to protest against the idea of invading Iraq. So it's something that I've been doing for a long time. Um, at the same time, it's something that nowadays there's more kids doing it, but
Well, there are more. The millennials are the largest generation, and
So
it's going to be crazy to see where they are 15 years down the road.
yeah, it is. The Honestly, the thing that concerns me most is probably the lessons being learned right now from uh, what people are seeing in the media now. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, after the quarantine, they watched all these white people gather in state capitals with their guns
Mm-hmm.
and get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the police come down on them with tear gas and rubber bullets,
You're
and
right.
they their demands met. Peaceful protesters are going out there. None of their demands are really being met. Well, I mean, some of them, but it takes them, the response against them has been pretty brutal in a lot of cases.
Right.
Um, Not everywhere. Some places have done the right thing, but um, my worry is that some people are going to see that and take the wrong lesson. That the idea is that, and no, what worries me most? What worries
Mm-hmm.
me is that those people are going to be right. That's the thing that worries me the most. Is
Right.
that um, the idea that you're not going to be hurt unless you're armed, unless you
Mm-hmm.
show up to a protest ready to tell them that you're not going to be stepped on. Um, at the same, but that's the problem, right? Is that that's just inciting violence.
Right. Well, the major change in this country a lot of times has been done with violence. That's the sad truth.
Yeah,
Um, I hear what you're saying. I saw a video of some of the protesters against the lockdown, and there was a police line, and the police are in their riot gear with shields and everything, and the protesters against the lockdown are actively pushing against the police line and their shields.
right.
Nothing was done. I mean, no
Nobody tipping.
batons were wielded.
Yeah,
Right. No people were arrested in mass. No tear gas was launched. Like
right.
you
Yeah,
said,
where's the tear
it's
gas to the face, like you see
yeah.
now? Where's the baton?
Oh,
Head
oh,
that,
right. I mean, they're just walking up to people, ripping off their mask or whatever, and then spraying them in the face.
yeah,
Like, that's not right.
and that's the thing that peaceful protest has a long history, right? That Gandhi and Martin Luther King were both big advocates, used it very effectively. The problem is that the theory is that you allow them to brutalize you, and that the other people seeing that eventually generates enough sympathy that you win in the end. I mean,
Right.
that's kind of how it happens, in past cases, and that's um,
No, yeah,
it is
you're
it
right.
is
You're right. And I had a discussion with a lady, a friend of mine on Facebook. Because she put up a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King and said, it had in text, he didn't have to burn. He protested peacefully and he changed the world. And so I responded. I said, let's not forget he was assassinated. And
yeah,
the change that he changed the world. It didn't stop George Floyd from being murdered the way he was. and,
right,
and a lot of people, and I'm not saying that people can't have fine thoughts or feelings around Dr. Martin Luther King, but when he was alive and he was protesting, he was reviled by a majority of the country.
oh
you
yeah,
they said, why do you have to sit at the lunch counter?
right,
Why do you have to come through the front door?
right.
Why do you have to have drink out of our water fountain?
Why do you
I-
have to disrupt my life? Why do you have to make it inconvenient for me? That's the people who got upset, right? The
and,
people who I still see getting upset to this day.
and those are some of the same kind of arguments. But trust me, a lot of these protests have been peaceful, and there has been blemishes by a small number of people, relatively.
Right.
I get it, but don't castigate this entire movement because of the actions of a few. Because I honestly, my belief is even if it wasn't any rioting or looting going on, people will still like the feelings that some people have about Black Lives Matters.
Hmm.
I mean, Black Lives Matters is reviled. Same thing. And
I tell
and
people, yeah.
I went to their website and I'm like, what's repulsive about Black Lives Matters and their mission statement? You'd probably be hard pressed to find anyone who is opposed to Black Lives Matters that will be able to tell you what their mission statement is. And let me go to this web page. So Black Lives Matter says their mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on black communities by the state and vigilantes. By combating and countering acts of violence, creating space for black imagination and innovation, and centering black joy, we are winning immediate improvements in our lives. What's offensive about that? So you're saying you don't want to eradicate white supremacy? I like that. Like you have a problem against that?
Well, I mean, so it's interesting how things being spun a certain way, right, will lead people to support things they don't know. So, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Like what they actually stand for is there's nothing offensive about it. But people,
Right.
but you're right though. The people who do get offended won't come right out. Most of them won't come right out and say it. But yeah, the thing they're offended is the idea of ending white supremacy. I mean, Al, that's at the root of a lot of this, right? When people say they're uncomfortable with a lot of what's going on, it's the idea that yeah, you are being confronted with uncomfortable truths about your place in the world right now,
Right.
and a lot of people, especially white people, are extremely uncomfortable right now with
Right.
what's going on. But that's good in a way. You know what? No change is comfortable.
Well,
It's not supposed to
again,
be.
if we lived up to the credo that all men are created equal, it wouldn't matter who was in the minority or whatever. And I think a lot of that
Hmm.
fear comes from all the statistics that show by whatever year it is that whites will be in the majority or minority in this country. There's
Yeah.
nothing to be scared about that if everybody is treated the same. If you uphold the principles in the Bible that you're supposed to treat your neighbor as yourself and love your neighbor as you love as thyself, we wouldn't have any issues.
Yeah. As you do to the least of thee,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Or what was the actually? So there was a quote. I don't even think it's from the Bible, but in the show scripts for today's show, when you had put down that there's still a pandemic going on, uh, the thought that came to me, it's a quote that's been running through my head about this whole thing, right?
Uh-huh.
All these people who are running around saying, oh, it's all a hoax, everything. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people he didn't exist,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what, you know, that keeps coming to mind for me when I see people running around saying, "Oh, it's all a big hoax. Virus doesn't exist." Uh, well, actually, this is the funniest thing that the argument that I've been hearing lately is people who say, "I'm not saying the virus isn't real. I'm just saying it's all a hoax."
Right. Right.
I've
I mean,
actually had a couple people try to make that
yeah,
argument.
because both those things could be true, right?
Yeah, you mean people might take advantage of the situation for their own gain? Obviously.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm
So,
not saying it's not real, but I'm saying it's a hoax.
yeah, that's the other thing that keeps coming up in my mind. The quote from Princess Bride. You keep using
uh,
that. I do not think it means what you think it means. You keep saying hoax. I don't think it's what you think it means. So
oh, okay.
I was so we've been talking privately in offline, about our show and
Mhm.
whether or not we want to rename it.
Yep.
For years, we were the only Gadgetcast doing audio podcasts, right? We were the only Gadgetcast on iTunes. We were the only Gadgetcast. We were Gadgetcast.
Right.
And now we just started doing video. And after I posted our first video, I came to realize there's already an established YouTube channel called Gadgetcast.
I told you, man. I told you.
Granted, they are Gadgetcast, 2 words. We're Gadgetcast, all 1 word. Technically, that's probably enough to get around copyright, but it's still going to be confusing.
Right.
So we are going to toss around ideas. Honestly, any viewers has a better idea for what we could call our show, feel free to leave a comment and let us know. So next week, we're going to have a guest, our first guest on the show. We have former NBA star Mateen Cleaves agreed to be on our show. So we're going to have a discussion with him about, honestly, I don't know about you. The discussion I'd like to have is one that we started to have earlier today. Just a quick story. My father quit smoking, my late father, when he was younger, he quit smoking cold turkey. Mm-hmm. After 35 years of smoking, he quit cold turkey. And I remember having a conversation with him about that, where he told me that the secret to changing a habit is not to focus on what you're trying to quit. The secret is to build a new habit, to focus on what you're trying to build. And that's the same kind of thing, that type of thing, keeping your eye on the target of what you're doing, keeping your eye focused on where you're going, is a theme that keeps coming up, right? There's motivational speakers say you gotta, what you focus on is what your reality becomes, right? There's another quote from Einstein where he said something about, where you put your energy, is what becomes reality. I'm totally screwing up that Einstein quote. Don't. But the point is that if you keep your eye on where you're going, it helps you get there quicker, more efficiently, right? You can find your path there. So my question, and this is the thing I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask Mateen next week, is, so we all want to build a better future, right? We want to rewrite the social contract, right? We want to make the better world. So my question is, what does that look like? Describe for me what the better world looks like. You did already, actually. You did that earlier today when you talked about really all it is living up to those words, living up to those things. But that's the question I was going to ask Mateen next week too.
Okay.
And there's other people I'm hoping to have on, honestly. There's some other people I've reached out to be on the show that hopefully will get back to us, and we'll pose the same kind of question to them, because I think if we can, the more we talk about it, and I think the more we can build that vision of what we want it to be, the easier it'll be to build it.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't build anything without some plans or a vision of what you want to build, even.
Yeah. I mean, heck, Phineas and Ferb, in the beginning of every episode, it's the first thing they do. They make a blueprint.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what you want to build, but I can't start till you get it right. Yeah.
Roller coaster in your backyard, you're gonna need yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the same kind of thing, right? If we're going to rebuild society, and this is the other thing I keep the other thing I keep telling people is that people talk about government like it's an other, like it's them. They say government is the problem. Government is this. We live in a representative democracy. Right. The government is whoever gets involved. The government is us. The government is a tool, and it is whoever picks it up and uses it.
Well, hey, this is my thing. We have too many. What do you want to call it? Latchkey voters, or what? Like we literally put people in power, and then we say, "Well, you deal with it. I'm hands off now. I'm done until the next primary or the next election." And no, that's not the case. Yeah. Imagine if you get hired at your job and your boss like didn't talk to you, didn't see you, you just go do your job. Hey, I explained what you supposed to do, and then I don't see you for another 2 years or however long. Really?
Yeah.
Hey, how did I do this past year? I don't know. I didn't see you, but now 2 years in,
Yeah.
now I'm gonna
There's
vote
no.
you out because I don't like what you've been doing. Well, you haven't given me any feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Obama talked about that too, and that was part of the thing is that people say, well, and that's part of the problem that I have, and it's the thing. I was a huge Bernie supporter, right? Like I believe in the things Bernie talks about. The
Mm,
problem is a lot of the Bernie supporters and people who are Obama supporters too didn't get what Obama was saying, in that Obama said, you know what, if you want universal health care, if you want this or that, give it to you. Get
right,
out there in the street, be active, get
right.
involved in the party, make it known. A lot of people have this idea of Superman syndrome, where they want to elect someone and then walk away from it and assume that that person is going to solve all their problems without
Dude,
more involvement.
the presidency can't do that. The legislature can do that. I
Right.
mean, think about it. If that's where the power is. I mean, hey, it's fine to have a figurehead that you like and admire, but he's not going to get the job done by himself. If anything,
Well,
it's the senators and the representatives that we put in place.
but even
If they
that are not going to solve everything if we're not telling them what we want, like you said.
Right, exactly. Right, because then you have outside interests that come in, they flash some money or whatever
Well,
else,
and that's the other
and
thing, that those outside interests, you know what they do? They meet regularly with them. They do
right,
more than give money. They regularly meet with that senator to reiterate what it is they want over and
right,
over.
right.
It's the thing that
Whereas,
we need to do, you know.
yeah,
And that's the
that's
other thing.
exactly
We used to have unions that could do that for us. Well, we don't have unions anymore, so we need to build something else to take that place.
hmm
And that's really, I think, where that's I think the next step of that conversation.
yeah, yeah. You're right. So I'm going to send you some ideas on names, and it
Okay.
maybe we'll get some emails, etc.,
Okay.
from people with ideas.
All right.
But we also should put up our web space, and we can put up articles and polls, etc.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do have our webpage. Right now, we have Facebook, Gadgetcast on Facebook, all one
Mm-hmm.
word. Um, we our domain name honestly is still up in the air about, because if we're going to change our name, you know, we're going to buy all these domains. So for now, I think probably Facebook is where we're going to, you know,
Okay.
post most of our stuff. Agreed?
Right.
I mean,
Yep. I'm
you
fine with that.
um, so yeah, for the people watching, please remember to like and subscribe.
Yep.
That's something we never had to do before, but now that we're on YouTube, we're YouTubers. You have to remind people to like and subscribe.
Yep.
So far, I think I'm the only subscriber we have. So
Oh no!
you might
I
want to
gotta
like.
subscribe.
So yeah, hopefully we'll continue this discussion with bringing some more guests and be able to build on it.
Right.
All
It's
right,
nice talking to you, sir.
you too, sir. And until next time, um, this is Gadgetcast.
All right. See you later.
Yeah.